Vermis Mysteriis is the second full-length album from German black metal band Baxaxaxa, which is originally I think it was a companion or an offshoot of Ungod, and that is an early sort of early legends in the German black metal lore that they were fairly unique in the age of bands like Dark Throne and whatnot. And this was a band that felt like it was more influenced, like I say in the review, a little bit of early Samael, their demos, and maybe Mortuary Drape in the sense that a lot of those similar, the mustiness, the creepiness, the keyboards, the slower pace, it all kind of makes sense if you go back to their 1992 demo Hellfire and check that out and see what they were all about at that time. Well, it was a one-off. They put the main guy in the band focused on Ungod, and they were quite successful in their run of albums in terms of underground spectacle. Uh, Kind of important to know Ungod if you're going to jump into what this band is all about in some sense. But this was always intended as I think as a more of a classic early black metal project in style that was functionally old school, sort of at that point of flux between the first wave and the second, which was inherently atmospheric, but also riff oriented. So their work um, finally kind of returned in 2017, and that's sort of where we're at now with the band. Is they've put out two full lengths, and Catacomb Cult, that was one of my favorite black metal records of that year. I thought it was very strong and very memorable. It's sort of for me, it upstaged the Dark Throne record that came out that year completely, because it just had the riffs, it had catchier songs, it was just more of an event for me. It spoke more of black metal in general, and that some of the clever songwriting, the riffs, and all that still applies to the second record, but it is very different, and we'll get into that after we've heard this first clip. So all it takes is maybe some louder keyboards and a couple of different people involved, and a band like this changes dramatically, but not that dramatically. The voice is still very similar from Traumatic. There's certainly the old school black metal feeling is there. There is a doomed element to a lot of the riffs they put out there, and you get the sense that this is still crawling out of the same crypt. Maybe the production values are sharper for sure, and the drums have a little bit more of a presence, and the keyboards are kind of what's new here from Earwicht, who is also he also played on the Runespell album more recently, which is funny because I felt like that record needed louder keyboards, and this one needs slightly quieter keyboards to sort of meld everything into one shape. And that's my only real criticism of the sound design, is just that the keyboards are they're very pronounced on this record, and they change the way it feels, almost like, I think I mentioned Tiamat in the review. Maybe I should have said Elastis. They both kind of turned into goth rock groups, but there was that point where they stepped into, they added louder keyboards, maybe groovier riffs, and it became a machine that moved as one. And they kind of do that on some of the songs here. There's some pretty strong pieces like Kiss of Shame and a few others that work in that way, and they do feel like that the worship hymn era of Samael in terms of the riffcraft and how it scrapes along. But this it feels like a much more free moving and less tightly wound version of this band, and that's both good and bad. I think that it will sound a little bit modern to people who are looking for something truly ancient sounding, and it won't be crusty enough around the edges for the people who try a little bit hard to sound retro. So I think there's for my own fandom, it's a good trade-off, because it still feels like black metal. It still has that doomed element to it, and it still sounds like Baxaxaxa. So Yeah, I got into this. I thought it was pretty good. It took me a couple of extra listens to really appreciate what they were doing. It's there's a couple of really long songs on here that were kind of unexpected in the turns they took, and it wasn't until maybe like the fifth or so listen that it kind of locked in, and I went back and re-listened to Catacomb Cult, and it made sense as album number two. So yeah, I thought a general improvement in a lot of ways, but it didn't quite have the exact same magic as the first record did, as kind of a surprise back then. So take that as you will, see how your own taste pans out, and you can check that record out tomorrow.